Namaskar. Namaskar and welcome to the Eikam series of Gita on the go. Today we cover chapter 1 of 18. And before I even introduce the idea of chapter 1 of 18, I have a question for Samir. Samir, chapter 1 is called the Arjuna Vishada Yoga. But I have two questions for you, not one. My first question to you is, why are there 18 chapters? Is there a significance there? The other one is, the Bhagavad Gita is a life commentary text. Why is every chapter a yoga text? So the first one is Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Okay. So two questions, why 18 and why yoga?
Okay, two very different questions, but let me try and answer them together. Number one, 18. 18 has a very esoteric significance in the entire set of configurations. We have 18 Mahapuran, we have the entire number of the Parvas in the Mahabharata is 18, the chapters in the Bhagavad Gita are 18. There were totally 18 Akshauhinis. Akshauhinis are the, let's say, what would you call them? A battle unit. There were 18 battle units in the field they were fighting. I've also tried a lot to try and find out what could these exactly mean. And you know what? When I started going to Shabarimala, the steps leading up to the temple, there are also 18 in number. And that's where the whole thing clicked. Ashtaraga, Panchatattva, that makes it 13. Ashtaraga is the Kama, Krodha, Moha, Lobha, etc. Panchatattva is the Kshitiya, Marutej, the 5 elements. That makes it 13. Triguna, which comprises the essential elements of what we are, the essential nature, the Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, Vidya, Avidya, and Vidya. This is the 18. This 18 comprises the entire universe. If you can't, the material universe comprising of energy, of matter, is comprised within this 18. So this 18 is a very wonderful number. And that's why perhaps when Vyasamuni broke this up into, see, the word Vyasa itself means editor. And his actual name was Krishna Dvaipayana. He was dark in color, so he was named Krishna. And he was born on an island, so he was Dvaipayana. Dweep pe janme the. Isliye unka naam Dvaipayan hai. Vyasa is a title. He was given the title of Vyasa because he was the editor of the Vedas. So he's Veda Vyasa. And even in this entire series of conversation, obviously in the conversation, Krishna would not have stopped the conversation in the middle and said, now we go on to chapter 2. Right? So the entire series of 700 shlokas is a series of conversations in which Sanjay has a comment here and there. Dhritarashtra has one comment to make to start the entire thing off, and so on and so forth. So this whole thing was a commentary or a dialogue. And Vyasa broke it up into 18 parts to remind us that this 18 perhaps comprise your present entire material world. Mm-hmm. So that's the beautiful explanation that comes across when we look at the number 18. Your second question was about the word yoga.
I feel the need to come in here because you were talking about 18. For me, so my magic number has always been in the context of 3 and therefore 3 square 9. So Navagraha, Navadurga, and 9 is a number I've resonated with, and 3. So there's 3, there's 9, and then I have always felt that it is possibly 18 because it is double the importance of 9. So the fact that you put and sort of consolidate my entire material world into the 18 is so much more powerful, because intuitively I had always felt that 18 was because it was double the impact of 9. So okay. That's you.
Yeah. So coming back to the word yoga. Now the word yoga comes from the root word yuj. Yuj means to join, right? Now yoga has been misinterpreted, interpreted. I don't want to get into that, but basically classical Hatha yoga has been also yoga, and it has also become from yoga to become yoga. Which is very different from the yoga that we know of. Yoga means to join, to be in union. And this union, I think the best explanation that came to me from this was from a particular sadhu in Sannyas Ashram in Andheri East in Mumbai. And this particular sadhu, I had gone and visited this, not this particular sadhu, I had gone to the Sannyas Ashram, and this sadhu who knew me, and he asked me, which chapter are you studying right now? And I told him whatever I was studying. And he asked me this question, हर एक चैप्टर को, हर एक अध्याय के पीछे इस नाम योग क्यों जोड़ा हुआ है? So I said, आप बताइए बाबा जी. So Babaji said, कि यदि तुम्हारे में विषाद भी उतना पैदा कर सकते हो तो उस विषाद से भी तुम जुड़ सकते हो। तो हर एक चैप्टर आपको उस तत्व से जुड़ने का तरीका बताता है, यानी हर एक चैप्टर योग का माध्यम है। At the end of every chapter, we use a sankalpa vakya, and in that we say Brahma Vidya, which is the knowledge of the divine, the knowledge of the Tat, and Yoga Shastra. It also gives us the means of joining, not only the theory but also the practical implication. Hence, it is yoga. So each chapter is a yoga, and this chapter, the one we are studying right now, is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga.
Translated as Arjuna's fear and sorrows.
Correct. It actually translates literally as melancholy. I like to look at it more not only as melancholy but also some bit of confusion. And that confusion, the melancholy, the sorrow, dejection, all of that comes across in chapter 1.
Fabulous. So there are 3 parts broadly in chapter 1 where we discuss Arjuna Vishada Yoga. And there are 3 phases that are very distinct in chapter 1. The first one is about the whole array of the battlefield and description of the battlefield. And really that's where Dhritarashtra asks Sanjay, and that's how the whole conversation begins, and Sanjay describes the battlefield. The second part of it is about Arjun's acknowledgement of his emotions. And I would like us to spend some time there, because for me, one of the learnings, since we spoke about the whole idea of battlefield and corporate warfare in our daily lives, the idea of acknowledging emotions, of course, Arjun may be overextending a bit, as we know, but even with that, just the acknowledgement, ownership, and honoring one's emotions. And therefore, the third part, which is the consequence of that emotion, of saying that I cannot fight the battle, and the giving up and the sacrifice. So those are the 3 aspects that we know Arjuna Vishada Yoga is split into. Given that these are the 3 aspects of part of how, and even chronologically it makes sense, because you're in the middle of battlefield, you're actually pre-battle, and there is a commentary that's happening between Dhritarashtra and Sanjay. How do we make sense of this chapter? What are the learnings we have?
Okay. So thanks for this wonderful question. You see, how does it even start? Forget the fact that the Dhritarashtra asks and all that. I mean, that's all background. But it starts off basically at a point where we see Arjun asking Krishna, take me to the center of the battlefield because I want to see who all are fighting. I mean, there's an underlying ego statement. कौन है भाई मेरे सामने खड़ा? हाँ तो सही. So, there's a very clear sense of I'm the greatest. I've been known as the Shrestha Dhanurdhar. My guru has made me to be the Shrestha Dhanurdhar, even better than him. And now let me go and see who are these chaps who want to fight against me. And you know what? Krishna is a wonderful psychologist. He goes and places the chariot right where Bhishma and Drona are standing. Not in front of Dushasan, for example, or not in front of Jayadratha, for example, with whom there were backstories which we know that there was animosity.
Correct.
Right in front of Bhishma and Drona. And Bhishma is a person who Arjun respects, beyond his own father, because he never knew his father. So he has always seen Bhishma as a father figure, and he has tremendous amount of respect for Guru. So when he sees these two in front, that's where the whole nervous breakdown happens. You're right when you say that one needs to acknowledge one's emotions before one can even tackle them. One can understand that. Then we understand that in modern day parlance when we are looking at emotional intelligence. And if you look at Goleman's theory of knowing one's own emotions is where we start the whole journey of EI, isn't it? This is where Arjuna has this complete breakdown, nervous breakdown, affecting him mentally and physically and intellectually. The body, mind, intellect complex has completely broken down when he sees in front of him me and mine. Challenge of me and mine, the moment that happens, that's where the starting point of the nervous breakdown happens. Obviously, we talked about it in our last episode. is a representation, it's a metaphor of the duality that we face in our lives, the battles that we face in our lives, the judgments that we continuously pass between our lives of this is good, that is bad, this is good for me, I like this, I don't like this. This duality is what is represented here in two lines of 18 Akshohinis standing there ready to battle with each other. And that's where Krishna is, right in the middle, facing Bhishma and Drona, and Arjun has this breakdown. Let's look at a particular shloka where this concept of me and mine comes up very, very clearly.
But before we step into that, from the point of view of setting the context, I really like the fact that you bring out the fact that Bhagwan Sri Krishna chose to stand in the middle of the battle facing Bhishma and Drona. He could have made it easier. He could have made it easier by standing in front, like you said, backstory है दुशासन दुर्योधन के सामने अर्जुन का rage भी होता और desire for battle भी होता. But to me, why this is also significant, and you've spoken about me and mine, but even in the larger context of mankind or the universal context, to me that context is important because it brings out the fact that Bhagwan Sri Krishna needed him to have a reality check.
Correct.
Matlab, it was important to understand what you were up against rather than build a scaffolding or a drishti or a darshan of that which is easy. Action and consequences of that.
You're right, Eika. You see, if he had not done that, then Arjun would have entered the battlefield with a wrong attitude. What is important is Krishna is not teaching him archery. Krishna is not teaching him how to become a better archer. What Krishna is doing in this entire journey is to remodel his entire attitude towards the world, the attitude with which he engages with the world.
His darshan. His darshan,
right? And that darshan, the way it changes Arjun is, and okay, let's look at it, let's take a step back. When does change happen? Change can only happen when I get out of my comfort zone, right?
And in that classic, in the modern, in the neo-management concepts, we have the whole transition of change, right? Moving from awareness to acknowledgement to acceptance of consequences, and therefore action and then appreciation. So
Okay.
अगर आपकी awareness flawed है, अगर आप limited view of the world लेकर चल रहे हैं और awareness flawed है, then you will certainly, like you said, rightly move with the attitude that they are my enemies and I'm here to win this battle. In fact, very often we can't even make out the difference between the battle and the war till you have a full perspective on it.
So therefore, what Krishna does is to be able to give that perspective, the change in perspective. He creates the situation where Arjun is now put outside his comfort zone, right in front of Bhishma and Drona. And therefore, let's look at this particular shloka. This is chapter 1, verse number 26. Tatra pashyat sthitan parthaha pitrun atha pitamahan acharyan matulan bhratrin putran pautran sakhins tatha. What is he talking about? Tatra pashyat, therefore he saw, stationed right in front of him, pitrun, fathers, people who are his father's age, father's contemporaries, pitamahan, his grandfather Bhishma, acharyan, kripacharya and dronacharya, matulan, the mamas, right, the maternal uncles, matulan, Shakuni and the other people, matulan, putran, pautran, sons, grandsons. He's seeing, now how do we identify all these relationships? We identify these relationships through our physicality, isn't it? If your mama comes in front of you with a completely different physical appearance, will you even recognize him? So how does that happen? I identify my mama with his body because I identify myself with this body. And this identification is so limiting that my perspective of the world is limited to me, mine. And that me, mine का जो जप है ना, इसको तोड़ने के लिए कृष्णा उसको हमें भीष्म और द्रोण के सामने रखता है. Now you must understand, we are all Arjun. We are the ones who are Arjun, who are standing right there with this huge concept of this is me, this is mine. This body is me and everything around me, ये मेरा है. Until that perception of me and mine is broken, and I look at all of this from a different perspective, I can't grow. My growth is limited.
And before we get on to how this perspective needs to shift, is the further breaking down that happens with Arjuna.
So yes, so the further breaking down that happens is now he's seen all of this and he starts looking at various situations that are in front of him, and he sees that his physical being starts getting affected. Now, I don't know if you have ever experienced extreme fear or extreme horror or any emotion at a very extreme level. Today, NLP says this. I think our rishis knew this very clearly, that what happens internally in our emotions comes out into our body. Let's look at shlok number 29. Vepathuscha sharire me romaharshascha jayate gandivam samsrate hastat tvakchaiva paridahyate. I am sweating. Eika, look at this. I am sweating. My hair is standing on end. My hand can't hold on to my bow, Gandiva. And I am trembling. My body, my skin is burning. Look at how he's describing his own emotions. He's not describing his emotions. You see, he's describing the effect of the emotions that are happening on his body. The identification with the body is still so very strong. But he's very clearly aware of the fact that it is his mind which is troubled, and the troubled mind is causing him to be becoming physically impotent in the way in which he tackles this situation of the war.
So even in that very crisis moment of war, and Arjun is a trained warrior. It's what we always say, what you do in your peacetime, the training that you do in your peacetime will prepare you for war. So Arjun is a skilled warrior enough to understand and know that what's happened, the ability to not distance, but the ability to establish causality between what I'm feeling in my emotions, impacting what is happening in my body. And the reason that I'm stating this so obviously, while it does seem obvious from the shloka, is because very often when we, and to me that's a takeaway for myself as well, that very often while we're in the middle of high emotion, we lose our cognition or rationality. And like you said, me and mine, we either become that emotion.
True.
In the feeling, or we don't recognize what it is doing to our body. So that distinction between what's happening in the body and what's happening in the mind being observed by the intellect is such a powerful space, even when Arjun is at his weakest.
So that leads to, okay, so you know what, I think Eika, we made things too heavy. Let me tell you a story. Want to listen to one?
Yes.
Okay, so you see, he said this, Gandivam sasrate hastat. He said the Gandiva. Now, his bow has a name, right? Do you name your car? I don't think.
I have named everything, even with my business lady.
But look at this. This bow, that's the tool that he uses for his war. It's got a name. Now, there were very famous bows in the history of, in our Purana. We have the bow of Shiva, which is called Pinaka. We have the bow of Ram, which is called Kodanda. Right? These are very famous bows. How did Gandiv come into the possession of Arjun is a very interesting story. So there was this whole forest called the Khandava, and the aggressors in this entire story, which is the Kauravas, they, in the division of land, they gave over Khandava to the Pandavas. Khandava then became Indraprastha, which now is called Delhi. And Khandava was a forest. It was burned down. In the process of burning it down, Agni, who wanted it burnt down, came and gave weapons to Krishna and Arjun, who then used those to burn the forest down. In that, one of the things that he gave was this bow, Gandhi. He also gave him a quiver, which would never, the arrows of that would never exhaust themselves. Also, one of the other things that we should also look at is the names of the Shankha. In the earlier parts of the chapter, in verses 12, 13, we get the names of the conches that are blown by the Pandavas, starting with the most famous conch of all, which is called the Panchajanya, which is in the hands of Krishna. And so these conches also have names. So Panchajanya, Devadatta, these are all beautiful names that the Pandavas' conches had.
Wasn't it Krishna with Panchajanya?
No, so that's the modern misconception कि कृष्ण ने शंख बजाया. नहीं, पहला शंख actually क्या हुआ? If you look at the way this whole build-up happens, is that Duryodhan and Dronacharya are having a conversation in which Duryodhan is getting a bit dejected at seeing the army in front of him, and Bhishma, seeing the dejection of Duryodhan, blows the conch. And then everybody blows the conches. So who's the aggressor? Who started the war? The theme is so very coherent, isn't it? It's so consistent right through. We always see that the Kauravas are the aggressors. The Kauravas are the ones who actually go out and do things which are not in the social framework, or not in the moral framework, or not in the ethical framework. And that's what is being protested against in this entire Bhagavad Gita. So again, why did Vyasamuni put that particular episode in? Is because it tells us the story.
But for me, why this is particularly fascinating and insightful is how evolved the whole description is, how evolved the structure and the format is, that Vyasamuni actually starts out by setting this very deep, vivid context of the battlefield, of the warriors' strengths, of their relationship with their weaponry, their relationships with each other, the impact of these relationships, so beautifully described, because that really is our daily life. Like you said, now my biggest battles are not with strangers on the ground, but my biggest battles are with my nearest and dearest ones. My spouse, my parents, my siblings, my children at home, and the same battles at work with my bosses, with my peers, with my superiors, with my teams. I'm not as worried about what my competitor organization is doing as much as how my teams are performing, what my peers are doing, who's getting a promotion, who my target being met. And therefore, I beautifully love the idea of the whole Kurukshetra, Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetra, and I know we'll come back to it. But the whole idea that my Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra is not an external, random, international, political battlefield, but the battlefield of me dealing with my emotions and my fears. And these emotions and fears, so 3 levels that I'm seeing it at. One is the battlefield of my emotions and my fears in my relationship with myself. The fact that these get expressed most in those that are closest to us.
Yes.
And the third, Samir, most importantly, is how we view this as a battlefield. Matlab, the fact that I'm at war, the fact that I'm in battle, the fact that I'm the aggressor and need to be victorious, need to conquer both my emotions and fears, and the fact that I view my relationship with you as a battle to be won. I mean, how significant is that in our daily lives?
So very, very nicely put, Eika, because you see our construct, the way we identify ourselves is at 3 levels. We firstly, and most often than not, identify ourselves with what is our physicality, the body. Our second is, so you know what, we make statements like, I am fat, I am thin, I am bald, I am hairy, whatever, right? These are all I am. So you've identified with the physical being. And you see that here where Arjuna is saying, the Gandhi is slipping from my hand. He's identifying with the body, the reactions of the body. He's also identifying with the fears that are coming into his mind. And he's talking about my fears, I am happy, I am sad, I am so on and so forth. This is the mental level. And then there is the third level where you intellectually analyze this body and the mind behavior, and you come to a certain set of conclusions, which again, if you have identified with your intellect, you come to wrong conclusions. Let me give you an example here. Let us see what happens with Arjuna in the next, immediately next shloka. He says something very important. He says, Na kangshe vijayam Krishna, na cha rajyam sukhani cha, kim no rajye na govinda, kim bhoger jivitena va. Eika, what does he say here? He says, I don't want victory. I don't want to win this war. I don't want the kingdom. You see what he's done? He's intellectually analyzed his bodily reactions, his mental turbulences, and come to a conclusion. I am a Vairagi. I have no desires. I don't want this. Now, is that actually what it was? If it was, then he shouldn't have even come for the war.
But Samir, this is exactly what we do in our daily lives, right? मुझे तुमसे लड़ना नहीं है। मुझे नहीं करना है। In a classic, in our most intimate relationships, so in a spousal debate between a husband and a wife, or between the mother-in-law and daughter, that act of giving up, saying I don't want to talk to you only. I'm going to walk away from it all. And it doesn't come from a space of not wanting it, but it actually comes from that space of the fear of the battlefield. You will prove me wrong. Either that space, the intellectual space, or the other space of saying that this is too much effort for me to put in.
So to be very gender specific, how many of our male viewers would have always heard this? क्या हुआ? कुछ नहीं.
I'm fine.
So ये जो कुछ नहीं है is exactly this, isn't it? I mean, I'm not saying that it's only the women who do it. I do it also. And you walk away from battlefield because you feel that, walking away is the best way to handle the battle. But that's not. You're just pushing the issue away for it to rise in a larger way later on.
And you're not detached from the battlefield.
No, you're not.
You're
exactly. You're still in the battlefield.
Yeah. You're right.
So now you know what happens in such a case. Your mind gets so disturbed that you start seeing things which are normal occurrences, and you start ascribing some things to them. So here, even in this also, Arjuna very clearly says, Nimittani cha viparhitani. He says that I am seeing things happen around me, which are omens. I am seeing jackals, I'm hearing jackals howling, I'm seeing crows flying south, I am whatever. I mean, he gives a whole bunch of descriptions. Now, these are things that happen all the time, right? I mean, jackals are meant to howl. But now you started ascribing reasons and thereby intellectually trying to support your view and say, I think I'm right. I look for validation.
Confirmation bias.
Yeah, confirmation.
In fact, Samir, this has also been discussed a lot in Shakespeare's plays, right? So there is the whole aspect of Macbeth and the witches, where this theme, this trope of seeing and ascribing meaning is a trope for reflecting and projecting your internal emotions. So frankly, Mahamuni Vyasa was a very, very well specialized dramatist to be bringing this in. So the whole idea of seeing stuff and ascribing meaning to it. It's the classic rope and snake analogy, Samir?
So I think, what, Eika, what we've done right now, I think we've thrown out a few thoughts, we've thrown out a few ideas. Arjuna, like us, we are all the Arjunas of today, need a coach, a guide in the form of Sri Krishna, who's ever present with us in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, and with whose help and we can traverse this journey very beautifully. So Eika, let me end this with the Sankalpa Vakya. And in the Sankalpa Vakya we say, and this Sankalpa Vakya basically, after I say it, I'll explain it before. We use two very important words here. We say the word Brahma Vidya and we use the word Yoga Shastre. When we say Brahma Vidya, we are talking of the theory which allows us to do yoga. Yoga being the union between me, that is Tvam, and Tat, that. But what is important is it is also a Yoga Shastra. Yoga Shastra means it also gives us the means to understand the tools to actually do this, not just the theory. So let's go to the Sankalpa Vakya. Hari Om Tat Sat Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Arjuna Vishada Yoga Nama Prathamodhyayah. Om.
Thank you, Samir. So here's what we've understood of the context thus far from chapter 1, from Adhyaya 1 of the Bhagavad Gita, the Arjuna Vishada Yoga. And I'm going to summarize this in three primary learnings that we've had. The first one is about our own identification. The question of who am I, setting the context, recognizing that I view the world as a battlefield and I'm at battle not with external agents and some externally ascribed enemy or foe, but I am at battle at the levels of my own emotions, my fear, my insecurities, and I am most at battle with those that are nearest to me and mine. My relatives, my family, my immediate family in my personal contexts, and my work, my colleagues, my teams, my superiors, my peers, they are the ones I get competitive against. The whole idea of my ego, let's check out what the battlefield is, let's see what you bring to the table, etc. All of this, Arjun in the middle of the battlefield is us. We are in that battlefield every single day with every one of our emotions, with all of ourselves. Our bodies are at war, our emotions are at war within ourselves, and our intellect is forever trying to make sense, and therefore even resorting to illusions and making my own sense of judgments and biases with the world that help me make sense of the world. That's the first one. The second learning or the understanding or the awareness that chapter 1 drives is the aspect of figuring out that I need to be in touch with my emotions. I need to acknowledge them. I need to be aware of them. I need to honor them. And while being there, have the cognition or the intellect to figure out the difference between my emotion and the body. And step back from that identification, which is what we will come to later. So the fact that I am not my emotion, I am not my body, and the ability to distill that is the second part of it. The third aspect is recognizing that and it's just building upon that whole emotional awareness aspect of recognizing and understanding that what I see as walking away or giving up or detachment is actually, or indifference is actually not detachment, but just the fear of consequences. I really don't want to be dealing with what happens if I continue in that battle. A. B. I don't want to be at war, but I am. So recognizing that I'm at war rather than being in denial of the same.
Correct.
And therefore the third aspect of evaluating my own self, of the ability to distill it through, walk through the process, unpack it, and then action it out, is the three messages that the Bhagavad Gita introduces in chapter 1 of the Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Why they're important is because if we don't step into this awareness and this consciousness, we will not be able to process ourselves as we go along. And therefore, with this, we set the context of chapter 1 of the Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Do write into us with your thoughts, your questions, your reflections, things you agree with, things you don't agree with, and whatever else that you want to share with us.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Na 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 na.